Hello, everyone. I'm just going to lower this. My name is Jane Weitzman, and I have the pleasure of chairing the JDC Archives. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for coming. We're delighted to have so many people when half of New York is away, and the other half now is tourists. I want to welcome you to this public lecture sponsored by the JDC Archives in the context of the Fred and Ellen Lewis JDC Archives Fellowship Program. We are delighted, again, that you all have come. The JDC Archives, which has housed the records of JDC since its creation over 102 years ago, is one of the most important repositories in the world for modern Jewish history. Visiting scholars from around the world utilize our unique offerings for their research, as do publishers, journalists, family researchers, curators, filmmakers, and others. I invite you to visit our wonderful website, archives.jdc.org, and to see the online exhibits, peruse our photo collection, use our names index, and research in our online text collections. Now, I would like to recognize and thank the Center for Jewish History, the co-sponsor of this program. I'd like to call on Julie Kaplan, Manager of Public Programs at the Center for Jewish History.
Thanks. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Center for Jewish History. We're happy to continue our partnership with the JDC Archives, presenting several lectures by their fellows each year here at the Center. Over the past 17 years, the Center for Jewish History has grown to be one of the greatest public Jewish historical and cultural institutions in the world. It was founded to bring together the collections of the partner institutions in one place, together comprising the largest and most comprehensive archive of the modern Jewish experience outside of Israel. The Center provides a collaborative home for 5 partner organizations: the American Jewish Historical Society, the American Sephardi Federation, the Leo Baeck Institute, the Yeshiva University Museum, and the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. Please join us for our next partnership with the JDC Archives on January 8th at 2 p.m. Dr. Joseph Benetov will be speaking about the fate of Bulgarian Jews during the Holocaust. Thank you for coming today, and enjoy the program.
First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about this fellowship and about Ellen Lewis. Ellen Lewis was a longtime JDC employee who, as a German Jewish refugee, was helped by us. She ended up working for the organization, and after her arrival in New York, she continued to work for JDC for many years. She left a very significant bequest to JDC and earmarked a portion for the archives. In tribute to Ellen Lewis, the Archives initiated this fellowship in 2012 to enable scholars engaged in graduate-level, postdoctoral, or independent research to conduct research in the JDC Archives. We felt that this was a fitting tribute to Ellen herself and that it was something that she would have liked. Our speaker today, Dr. Naida Michal Brandl, is one of 2 fellows who have been awarded this fellowship for 2017. Dr. Brandl will be addressing us today on the topic, Jewish Life in Croatia, 1945 to 1952. Our format is that our guest speaker will talk for about 45 minutes, and we will then entertain questions. Our speaker, Naida Michal Brandl, is Assistant Professor in History at the Chair of Judaic Studies at the University of Zagreb. Dr. Brandl's scholarship centers on Jewish history in the aftermath of the Second World War, post-war Jewish history, tangible and intangible Jewish heritage in Croatia, as well as Jewish history between the 2 Adriatic coasts through maritime documents in Italian archives. Dr. Brandl was born in Split, Croatia. She studied history and archaeology at the University of Zagreb. She attended the program for the master's degree in Jewish history at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America in New York for 4 semesters and spent an academic year at the conservative yeshiva in Jerusalem. She enrolled in doctoral studies in modern and contemporary history at the University of Zagreb. Her PhD was on the Croatian Jewish community in the intermediate post-war period. Her recent publications include The Jewish Religious Community of Zagreb, 1945 to 1946, Jewish Topography of Zagreb, Jews Between Two Totalitarian Systems, Property Legislation, and Jewish Elites in Zagreb from 1941 until 1945. Dr. Brandl.
Thank you for your kind introduction, and it's an honor to be here. And I would like to thank to JDC Archives for the fellowship I got this year. I just started my research, and I've already found a lot of interesting documents that help me to understand this period also from outside archives. As it was already said, the topic of the lecture today is Jewish life in Croatia from 1945 to 1952. And in order to start to understand the immediate post-war period in Croatia, I would like to give you a little bit of background of who the Jewish community in Croatia is. So it's 2 types of communities. The first really small one was the Sephardic communities both in Split and Dubrovnik that are dated, their permanent settlement is dated in the 16th century after the expulsion from the Iberian Peninsula. And they never exceeded 300 people. So they were really small communities and also very small, on one side, Venetian Split, and on the other side, it was the Republic of Dubrovnik, or as you may know it as Ragusa, for then actually 4 centuries without any break or expulsion. The other community is the Ashkenazi community from northern Croatia that start its permanent settlement at the end of the 18th century through the Joseph II reforms. And this was much numerous community, so by the Second World War, it numbered 25,000 people. So if you think about Eastern Europe, these are really very small communities. The peak of this community was both in Austro-Hungarian Empire as well as in Kingdom of Yugoslavia. And the community was emancipated in 1867 as all the Jewish communities in Austro-Hungary. And what is also interesting to mention, and I can show you the map, is that although it's a very small community, we have Ashkenazi and Sephardi, and then during the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the northern part, Croatia and Slavonia, was under Hungarians, and the southern part, Dalmatia and Dubrovnik, was under the Austrian laws, Austrian half of the empire. So they have a little bit different histories from the beginning. What is also interesting to point is that the Jewish community in both Austria-Hungary and Kingdom of Yugoslavia and in the first days of socialist Yugoslavia, that means from the end of the 18th century until 1952, was considered a religious group, not a national minority as it will become after 1952. The nature of settlement is like in Hungarian history. If somebody is familiar with it, that means that there was a network of very small communities to some bigger communities, a lot of communities through the whole northern Croatia that will change again after the Second World War. Sometimes only 2 to 3 families just settled one small town and ran usually small stores, so really kind of Hungarian Jewish history. What's also interesting is that with the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, and that's the blue one, you see, it changed its nature a bit, because during the Austro-Hungarian period, it was at the border of the empire, and it was a borderland community that maybe looked like American communities in the last century as well, like these pioneers in Midwest or further to the west. And after the unification of Yugoslavia, so in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, it became the center community of the new kingdom. So the Croatian community and now northern Serbian, that used to be southern Hungary, our borders change a lot. These were now Ashkenazi, very integrated community in Austro-Hungary, and they became a center, demographic center of the new kingdom, as well as economical center of the new kingdom. The rest of the communities that made the Yugoslav community were the Sephardi community of Bosnia and Herzegovina that was incorporated in Austro-Hungary in the beginning of the 20th century, as well as Sephardi community in Serbia, and what is today Macedonia used to be part of Serbia, as again, borders are changing all the time. And I guess you will have something more about part of that community in the next lecture. So who were these people? Very acculturated, in religious sense, Neolog communities. They were several really small Orthodox communities. In Eastern Croatia, there were also Hasidic communities. But major part were Ashkenazi Neolog communities. So this is the community. Here we have a meeting in 1930s of Ahduta Tzofim and Ashomer Tzair, and the man with the glasses later he was first rabbi in Osijek, or the teacher in Osijek, then he became rabbi of Zagreb, and then chief rabbi of Zagreb. And then the man holding the pen became the first president of the Federation of Jewish Communities after the war. So also here we can see the future rabbi of Zagreb with the glasses, having the group of children in Osijek in Eastern Croatia, also in 1930s. So just to give you an illustration. Also just a small introduction about the Second World War. Second World War in Croatia started on April 6, 1941, with several occupation forces occupying Yugoslavia that were, of course, Germans, Italians, and Hungarians, and then Bulgarians to the east, which is not part of our story because we are concentrated here on Croatia. And then parts of the territory were annexed by Italy and parts by Hungary. And soon, in April the 10th, the so-called independent state of Croatia was proclaimed. It was the collaboration state that collaborated with Germany, and it also encompassed the Bosnia and Herzegovina, but without territories that were directly annexed to Italy or to Hungary, which will later be important for the survival of Yugoslav Jews in general. And this country was divided roughly in half, and there is a line in the middle between Italians and Germans, as they had the military control over these parts of the independent state of Croatia. So the independent state of Croatia introduced anti-Jewish laws pretty swiftly, and already in April 30 we had racial laws. In Croatia, all communities were closed. And then they were reopened in May, just some of them, and they had to, first, they were under the direct control of the Ministry of Interior, and then also they were in charge of all racially defined Jews, and the membership was obligatory, and they had to take care of people who started to be deported into Croatian concentration camps. So actually, it was a strange situation where the communities took care of people who were deported, of people who were still not deported living in the city for all the age homes, and also ran elementary schools because the Jewish children could not go to schools with other children anymore, and some kind of middle school. The middle school was not allowed, so some kind of a place where the middle school children could spend their time. By 1942, only the Zagreb Jewish community was operative by summer of 1942 because all other Jews from other parts of the independent state of Croatia were deported. And by that time, Germans are taking in deportations, and from summer 42 on, Croatian Jews or Jews from the independent state of Croatia were deported mainly to Auschwitz. Now, the fact that the Jewish community of Zagreb was operative during the whole war will actually become a very important fact in re-establishing a Jewish community after the war, because they were evicted from their building, but then they had to move to a building of one of the Jewish organizations, and they took archive with them as well, so we have a really, in this situation, the whole archive of the Jewish community of Zagreb was saved, so we can follow the Holocaust and the post-war era pretty well from these archives. About end of war in Croatia is also a bit complicated because the liberation started from the east together with the Red Army, and then from the south the partisans. So the Croatia started to be liberated already in fall of 44, and then Zagreb was liberated only on May the 8th, 1945. So it's the end of the war itself. So the first situation was May 45. We had, as I said, 25,000 Jews in Croatia, plus 14,500 Jews in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but I'm not dealing with this situation because it was the same kind of country during the war. I'm concentrating here just on Croatian communities. So from 25,000 people, between 4,000 and 5,000 survived. We don't know the exact number because a lot of people survived, first fled into Italian zone, then in September 43, when Italy capitulated, they moved further to Italy or they went to partisans. Part of Croatian Jews survived in partisans, being either active partisans or just being on partisan territory. So these are also different groups. And also a certain number of Croatian Jews, much more Serbian Jews, survived in the military as military prisoners of war. So it was known that they were Jewish, but because they were caught in uniform, they were just they were in a prisoners' camp, and these people that survived there actually re-established the federation later after the war. This is also one of the interesting points. So what's different now is that instead of having this network of lot of small communities, of course, only a fraction of Croatian Jews survived, and then Zagreb was in the beginning the only community because it continued. The same people who led the community from May 43 continued to lead community now after the Second World War. They, of course, were able soon after to return to their building that was taken by Gestapo. And the other buildings, like a rabbinate building or Hevra Kadisha, just were never returned. So now we have a situation where the community that took care of the deportees in concentration camps now took over care of those who survived. So during the war, they used to send, and this is something that I'm not dealing in here, I'm here dealing only with the post-war period, but it's also interesting to know that Red Cross helped tremendously sending food packages or money that the community was trying to find a way to buy food, which was scarce during the war. A lot of this help actually was just channeled through Red Cross, but actually the Jewish humanitarian organizations helped during the war actually through Switzerland as a neutral country. As you probably know, it's not only Croatia, it's a general story of occupied territory. So who used to come back? First, Jews that were in Italy. They had order from the Yugoslav government, all Yugoslavs, not only Jews, had the order to repatriate. And this repatriation was also a way to get back people's property. So it was also one of the reasons for people to come back. Then also some of the refugees, pre-war refugees from the Third Reich, so Germans, Austrians, Czechs, Polish, and other Jews, very small number of them was able to survive. They also were starting to come back through Zagreb. And of course, how it looked like, it's a situation where Zagreb itself was not destroyed in the war, but some of the other cities were. Also from 40 synagogues that used to be in Yugoslavia, only 20 survived, 20 were destroyed. We will see later what happened with those that survived. The food was scarce, anything else, I mean, people were coming back and they needed a place also to sleep, and we will see later Jewish community provided that as well. But in the beginning, they just had to close themselves and cover themselves and have the roof over their head. And a lot of this first help came right after the war from different international Jewish organizations. So in the beginning, there are three different stories that tell the story about beginning of the JDC activity in Yugoslavia. But before that, it's, as I mentioned before, the liberation of Yugoslavia started already in fall 44. So Belgrade, the center of Yugoslavia, was liberated in November 44. And right after the liberation, the Federation of Jewish Community was reestablished. As I said before, usually by officers in oflags, so people who were prisoners of war, the officers of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia army. Right away, they start to reestablish connections with different Jewish international organizations, and this was not seen as a problem by the new government, but the clear border was set by renewing membership in a Zionist organization. So the World Zionist Organization could not enter, or the federation could not reestablish membership within the Zionist organization. And when we talk about the orientation of the Jewish community in both Croatia and the whole Yugoslavia, but I'm more comfortable talking about Croatia because I know it's better than the whole country. It's a very different community, as I said before. So majority were really integrated within a society in a way that they were not assimilated, far from that, but they were acculturated, and they were members of the community, but not that active. The most active component of the two biggest Croatian communities were Zionists. So they had the power in these communities in all interwar period. So it was a really important part of the community. When we talk about young people, a majority of Zionist youth were part of Hashomer HaTzair, while from 30s, when the Communist Party in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia was banned, the communists used to infiltrate, so-called, that's how they called it in documents, within the left-wing civic organizations. So we had a big struggle between the communist youth, the Jews from communist youth, and the Jews from Hashomer HaTzair. So it is said in some of the documents from interwar period how actually this they were not in really good terms. So this was kind of what happened actually, that the Zionist organization could not get in. But who could get in is World Jewish Congress, and of course the Joint, or JDC, but not directly. So the JDC was in Yugoslavia 49 up to 50, from 45 to 49 up to 52, but not directly. But the special body was formed, Autonomous Relief Committee, that was formed within the Federation of Jewish Communities. And then through that body, both money, food, blankets, and a lot of other things were sent. And this is the photo of a lecture that one of the convoys that were actually sent in Yugoslavia. And as I said before, there are three different stories about that, how JDC came to Yugoslavia. So one of it said that there was an architect working in UNRRA, so the UN organization, by the name Morris Dubin, a Jewish guy, who was asked by the JDC to assess the situation in Yugoslavia, how the Yugoslav Jews are handling the situation, and he concluded that they needed relief. So the JDC sent a medical delegation that arrived in Yugoslavia. So I'm just now citing what I found in not only in JDC, but some other archives and also the literature, namely Menachem Shelach, who the Israeli historian from Croatia, who used to write about this period. Also, the Jewish community in Belgrade went to Bucharest and also notified the JDC in Bucharest to send help to Yugoslavia as well. And on the same time, there was a JDC representative for Yugoslav Jews by the name Wiener, and I found his name now only in Hebrew, so it says Julius. I'm trying to find it now in archives to find the document. So he was sitting in Bari in Italy, and this is where there was a big camp where a lot of Yugoslav refugees used to be, also Jewish refugees. So he was sending a letter about the situation, and then somebody, and the letter is not signed, so I still don't know who sent the letter, but somebody from Jewish community of Zagreb, so now this is the third story, assessing the situation from 45, and it says between 1,200 and 1,300 Jews returned to Croatia. We will see in 46 we already have 2,500 members of the community. So it's just the beginning. It's a summer of 45. It's a beginning of return to Zagreb. And then it's interesting for the Zagreb community. It says it has 600 to 700 members. And during the war, about 700 to 800 members in mixed marriages remain. So the number is around, he said, 2,000. There are other estimates that talk about 600, 700, so it's a very, very small, now very small community. So it's interesting, very interesting situation where we have around people are coming back to Zagreb, and now the community leadership is assessing situation, and they realized that around half of the people that returned were converted to Christianity. So what that meant in Central Europe is that people, when they got baptized, people became members of the Catholic Church. So one of the first tasks of the community itself was to help these people to get their membership cards, let's call them like that, from the Catholic Church back to the Jewish community. And we have a lot of forms in Jewish community archives in Zagreb that are sent, sometimes even for more than one person, to the Catholic Church. Can you please sign out? And then there is a list of names. It's very interesting notion of what is to be Jewish or what is to be Christian. I was kind of, I must say, surprised by these documents. And it was pretty clear, as I said, the Jewish community was seen as a religious community, so it was pretty clear they could not become or be readmitted within the community if they didn't get out from the other community. So this was one of the first tasks that community had in front. The second one was to try to find Jewish children that were hidden during the war. So you can see in a lot of documents in the archives where they try to locate these children, and people understanding if their parents are not alive, so they are trying to get them back to the community. And this is the period where there is an orphanage opened in Belgrade for Jewish children. These children later on will all, actually majority of them will leave already in December 48 when the Aliyah will start. So this was something that they tried to do in the beginning, they understanding that some of these children were really babies. So it was a question if they could locate all of them and if the respective new parents or people who were hiding them would let them go or just notify the community that they are there. So it was really a hard situation. Then also, they actually took care about everything. It was like a continuation, and this is something that the way of thinking and organizing within the community was kind of, it continued the one that was during the war helping people in the concentration camp, sending food parcels in concentration camp. Now what the community did, as soon as they returned, and even before when they used some other buildings to their building, they went to the Yugoslav army, asked for beds, and that's what you put on the bed, I don't know how to say it in straw, blankets and so on. So the building became a shelter right away. And then they opened the kitchen, the community kitchen, and then also they said that people start in that period also to come back from concentration camps, mainly from Auschwitz, because people from the Croatian concentration camp didn't survive, just a very small number of them. And it was this document that says, please be careful, they are really in a very bad psychological situation. When they come to eat, don't make any noise. And there is this idea of all the trauma that survivors went through. And then we have them being then the first to be fed. And then later we can see that some people came back and slept somewhere else, and just used to come and have food in the community. Also, There were doctors that came back, then opened the ambulance, and also there was a Iso Weiss, was his name. He was the eye doctor, and also had the glasses shop. So he was donating glasses, and it was really the situation where it was this idea that first people need to be sheltered, and then everything else. So by 1946, there were several communities besides Zagreb that were re-established again. So we have a very small community of Split on the coast that from the 19th century was not only Sephardic, it was a combination of Sephardi and Ashkenazi community, then Rijeka, also on the sea, and Osijek, that used to be next to Zagreb, the biggest Croatian community, and then really tiny communities in the north, Čakovec, that was under Hungarian control during the war, Dubrovnik, and so on. This is the Zagreb Jewish Community building that became the shelter for the returnees. One of the important issues in this phase, the first phase of reestablishing the community and return of the survivors, were property issues, of course, that people found when they came back, usually didn't find places they left. So immediately after the beginning of the Second World War, one of the set of laws, actually they were not called laws but statutory provisions. Most of these statutory provisions dealing with property or Jewish property were brought between April and June 1941. So it's 2 months since the collaboration or occupation and collaboration. Majority of these laws were passed in first 2 months. And then we have another 2 that nationalized altogether in October 41, and then definitely on October 42, when everything was signed to the independent state of Croatia. So it was several phases. It was said that the reason was to nationalize the property of each Jew, as well as any Jewish enterprise with or without compensation, in favor of the independent state of Croatia in order to reconstruct the economy. So there was a still war going on when the partisan government brought different laws taking out of power these laws, as well as laws in occupied Serbia and so on. It's a complicated country also during the occupation. And there is no one unique legislation. It's a lot of laws after the Second World War that are taking the issue of property. So the idea of all of these laws proclaimed from 44 to the end of 45 was to return the situation from the occupation, either in Croatia, Serbia, Hungarian annexed territory, and so on, to the situation before the April the 6th, 1941. It's interesting that this is also one of the issues where the Jewish community stepped in. So people used to send their data about their membership, and then the Jewish community was appealing to the government or helping them to channel this to the courts and so on. So the idea was, as I said, to return the situation to situation before April the 6th. And then whoever got their property returned didn't get all the property returned, but just up to the size which guaranteed the life that was not much better from the life of the others. Now we had a different ideology in power, so the government was just deciding how much a person needs, not just to return the property that they used to have. Although, as I have to say, some of the property was destroyed, so not all the property was saved. Also, if the government saw that some of the property was better off in a state management, then if people wanted the property back, they used to be put in a court as collaborators because their property was operative during the Second World War. Then actually it was the way, if they said no, you should rather decide to cancel your claim. Otherwise, you could become collaborator, which is kind of outrageous, although historians should not say something like that. But soon enough, the property started to be nationalized. So from 46 up to 58, and even later, some of the laws were even of a later date, the property was nationalized. So first, the big businesses were nationalized, and then, which is important point, the small and middle enterprises were nationalized in March 1948, and the first Aliyah started in December 48. So it was kind of also incentive for people, because majority of people were in middle and small enterprises, so they actually were left without the means of living. And if you're trying to find a law about nationalization, you will not find it, because there are very different ones. The pharmacies were nationalized by one law, the big businesses under another law, the apartments under the third law, and then there are different ways of nationalizing property. We have sequestration, confiscation, nationalization, expropriation, and agrarian reform. So it's a pretty complicated issue. So this is the situation after the war. So we have the period between 45 and 48, when still a certain amount of property was private, when people start to reestablish their life, they start to reopen their stores, they start to reopen their practice. What was not reopened also were Jewish societies, different Jewish societies and different Jewish organizations. So unlike the other Eastern Bloc countries, Yugoslavia had a communist government from 1945, not from 1946, 7, or 8, like some others, but from 1945. This is also one of the reasons, I guess, I'm still trying to figure it out, why JDC was not there directly. As we said, probably it was not let in. So, this is the situation where the Jewish communities were reestablished, but not other Jewish organizations, not Hevra Kadisha, not in any city, not women's organization, not different youth organizations. These were not reestablished, and as far as communal property is concerned, the property of these organizations was not even on the negotiation table because they were not renewed. Although in their documents, it was stated if they will cease their activities, the property would go to the closest Jewish community. This never happened. Also, this is not only the property issue, this is ideological issue, because by the communist ideology, as at least one that was operative in Yugoslavia, the state was one that was supposed to take care of people, not some kind of volunteer organizations or any kind. This was the state role, to take care about people. And 60 years later, people in Croatia still say the country didn't give me anything. So it's this kind of, it's the changing of way of thinking with this state being a mother and father. what happened is that some people, we had, of course, different stages then of emigration. Of people, it was the question, should we stay or should we leave? And they were first people who never repatriated. So this is also one of the issues we have when we try to do database of people who were victims, people who survived but never repatriated. We have a lot of work to do in establishing the situation in Croatia. So some people never repatriated, although that meant that they will not be able to get their property back because the citizenship and the property were now linked. Some of the community members, usually those who were well off, emigrated from 1945 on in a way that they gave up their property and they got the exit document and they emigrated usually to South Africa, United States, Canada, Australia, a little bit less to Europe. In 1948, the possibility opened to make Aliyah or to emigrate to Israel, and it was organized by the Federation, and we have a huge amount of documents talking about Aliyah, what people could take, what people could not take. It was allowed to take a small amount of money. It was allowed to take furniture, for instance, but it was not. But to take a stamp collection or some painting, people had to go to different commissions that made that saw if this could be taken or not. And then they didn't get the passports, but they got the family passport forms, kind of, where they put their name, family name, children, name of children, photographs, and we also have the idea of who these people were, how they survived the war. So it's a very good, these passport forms are actually very good sources that tell story about the community pre-war and in a war period. And also, so this Aliyah started in December 48. Then we had another one in 49, in 50, 51, and 52. Majority of people went from 48 and 49. In 48, all the rabbis but one left, all the Orthodox community, all Zionists. And then further until 1952, when only 10 people went. One last sentence about Aliyah Bet, which is also interesting, whoever is interested in this issue, is that Yugoslavia, mainly Croatia, was a very important spot that Aliyah Bet went through. And I hope I will find documents talking about the JDC role and the World Jewish Congress role in the Aliyah Bet, the way how they actually negotiated with the government to turn the blind eye. I found that the only thing that the Yugoslav government wanted is that no Yugoslav Jew live on this Aliyah. So this is the situation that after these Aliyot, we have a situation where 2/3 of the survivors left Croatia, and situation now is that we have around 1,000 Jews in Croatia, or there are different data, yes, about the number. And I would like to thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brandl. That was quite illuminating. I was there after the last war, and everything had changed completely. The Serbs and the Croatians hated each other so much that they actually liked the Jews, and the Jews were the mediators for things like, they actually became sort of the Red Cross for things like drugs. And I'll never forget driving across this country, or several countries, because they were all different countries really, in a Jeep with a big Jewish star that said La Benevolencia on it, which was the Jewish organization, the relief organization that the Joint worked through. So quite a bit did change, but there weren't so many people for it to change for. I hope that you'll have some questions for Dr. Brandl. Any of you? Yes.
Is there a functioning community in South Africa? Because I recently was in that area most of the small synagogues were just little museums. And is this true? I was told there's one rabbi in all of Croatia.
We have 3 rabbis.
Okay, where are they?
They are all in Zagreb, so we have a big community that is part of now Federation of Jewish Community of Croatia that has 10 small communities around Croatia. Then we have another community in Zagreb that is kind of, it's very small, and then we have Chabad with the rabbi. So this is the situation now. As far as synagogues go, I said that 20 survived. Some of them were sold later on. Mostly when the Federation realized that there would be new nationalization laws, so they tried at least make some money. And I heard story that I still don't have a document for, that some of this cash that came from selling the synagogues were then gave to people who made aliyah on the boat when boat left the territorial water, because the amount of money they could take to Israel was not really helpful. So this is just a story that I have to confirm, probably not in documents, but...
Hi, I'm curious about the Jews that became Catholics when they returned. I'm assuming they did that willingly, and did they want to return to the Jewish faith, or was that something the community was forcing on them?
We have 2 types, let's say, on converts to Christianity in pre-war Jewish community. One were usually women who converted in order to get married, because in both Austro-Hungarian, Croatian period, and also the first Yugoslavia, there were no civil marriage in this part of the country. There was in some part that were before under direct Hungarian rule, because the laws followed the previous country and its law. So this is one type of converts, and these were these so-called mixed marriages during the war. So if women converted and married in a Jewish ceremony, they were now Jewish, but according to the Ustasha, the racial laws, these were mixed marriages. On the other hand, from 1938, there was a substantial number of converts, especially after Anschluss, because people thought this would save their life. So this was the reason of their conversion, and they came willingly. They came to become the member of the community again, so the community helped them to get the sign out from the church.
I could have listened to you for another couple of hours. The information was very, very interesting, but 3 quick points or questions. How many Jews were killed in local camps run by the Ustashi rather than by the Germans? Could you just comment on that? Number 2, the Germans tended to separate Jewish soldiers that was in the Soviet army. So these Yugoslavian Jews, they were captured by whom? By the Italians, by the Germans, by someone else? Could you explain that? And finally, on the Aliyah bet, was there a major campaign by the Israelis and their representatives to encourage people to leave between 45 or 48? And did JDC support that surreptitiously? Is there any evidence of that? In other words, really to get people to go out the way that was done in the DP camps. And did Don Lanner play any role at all after the war? He was parachuted in by the British from Palestine to work with Tito. Did he have any role afterwards?
I didn't hear the name, sorry.
Don Lanner.
Aha,
He later
okay.
became a general in Israel.
They were around 17 to 18,000 Jews that were killed in concentration camps in Croatia. So majority were, especially Bosnian Jews. Later on, for instance, Zagreb Jews, it's half-half. It depends when the deportations came, because the Germans stepped in summer 42, and the explanation was that Croatians were not fast enough. But if we look also at the wider context, this is when the big deportation wave's going on. So I mean, the reason would be, I would split it. The second question was the Aliyah Bet.
No, the soldiers.
The soldiers. They were captured mostly by Germans. These were the Kingdom of Yugoslavia soldiers, and we have people writing about the fact that the Germans tried to make the Yugoslav prisoners to differentiate between Jews and non-Jews, but that they refused. So they were kept all together. They tried to also put them in a different fence, let's say, but the army officers or soldiers refused. And the third one is that Aliyah Bet could be possible through Yugoslavia only if they guarantee that no Yugoslav Jews will go with it. So it was pretty clear message. And we have different people coming from Mossad Aliyah Bet negotiating. First, there were people in leadership of the community in Belgrade that hid these Jews. And then the secret police found them, and then they made a kind of a deal that, okay. Also, it's interesting that the Jewish communities wanted that JDC send food, blankets, and so on, because when they start to send money, because Yugoslavia was under the embargo of having foreign currency because of the political situation. So when the JDC sent money, then the majority of that money was eaten by the changing. But I was told by Yehuda Bauer when we discussed this issue that maybe this was done on purpose to send money. So if they can have currency, they will turn their blind eye to the Aliyah Bet. And we have Yugoslav army having these camps for people who made Aliyah Bet. And the big train composition going from Zagreb to Bakar, it's near Rijeka, it's the port where the ships used to live, were under the Yugoslav army. All traffic stopped so that the trains could pass. So it was a really interesting situation, but no Yugoslav Jew was allowed to leave.
I was in Croatia in 2014, and I heard the accusation unhappily made that Jewry internationally did not do enough for the Croatian Jews in regard to repatriating their property. For example, even the accusation that the new museum in Zagreb of modern art, that many of those pieces belong to Jews, and that nothing was being done. Do you think that that is a legitimate argument? Were the Jews in Zagreb wealthier, much wealthier, before the war, and had they been deprived of materials that should have been returned to them?
Yes, but the international Jewish organizations are working on this, so I would say that they are really. It's not up to the international Jewish organizations, it's up to the government of the Republic of Croatia. That's...
Okay, then I'll ask it another way. It's the restoration of artwork, for example, has gained prominence in Austria and in Germany, some prominence, but not in Croatia. Is that because of the Croatian government, or because the Croatian Jews did not exert as much power as the German and Austrian Jews were able to? I don't know. I'm really quite bewildered by what I heard.
It's the complicated situation of ex-communist country that, as I think well, there are some that were better. Croatia haven't started talking about restitution yet, so it's long. Now it's, I mean, it broke all the deadlines, but it will start soon, that's for sure. So it haven't started in some bigger level yet, but hopefully it will start soon. So.
My question is about the community in Split. From what I understand, there still is a Jewish community, and my uncle, who only passed away recently, was there. So do you know anything about their existence now? And during the war, I know that's where many of them fled.
Well, I was born in Split, and I am the member of the Jewish community in Split, although I live in Zagreb. It's 100 members, very sweet and warm community, secular like all the rest of the community in Croatia. But for half a week, they discuss what to prepare for Shabbat, and they meet every Shabbat, and it's honor to be the member. I cannot be objective here.
Yeah, is there anything left of the Sephardic community?
We had two Sephardic communities, Split and Dubrovnik, and now Dubrovnik is really small, and it runs its museum, and it has one of beautiful synagogues. As far as Split is concerned, it's a mixed community. It's both Ashkenazi and Sephardi, because after the fall of Venetian Republic, then Austria ruled Split until 1918, so clerks, bureaucrats, I don't know, the different people came from the center to Split, so now it's mixed, but it still has a Sephardic synagogue from Baroque period and a cemetery that is mostly Sephardic from the 16th century, so yeah.
Hi. Could you please tell me, here I am. Awesome. Yeah, listen. Can you please tell me who maintains the Jewish cemetery near the Vidal Itza in Split?
Who maintains it?
Yeah, who maintains it?
There is a Jewish community that takes care of it, and I don't know if you were there. There is
yes, many times.
Morgue in that is now a coffee shop, but that the Jewish community took that decision to rent it because it's a park, wood, and when people are there and everything is light up, then it's kind of safer than to leave it just. So this was a decision taken by Jewish community.
We maintain. I mean, like every August I walk through it. I pick up trash, and the Jews from the cruise ships pick up the trash. But I'm just wondering if there's any official entity that I can talk to about that cemetery.
It's a Jewish community in Split.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
all right. We'll talk to you.
they have the website, and you can, yeah.
This is a subject that touched me because I am one of the 4,000 survivors of the 25,000 that didn't. And, but recently my husband and I went to Zagreb, and we did go to Mirogoj to see where my grandfather is buried. And it took us about an hour to look around the graves, and there was no grave of my grandfather, which I remember was there. And so the next day I called up the Mirogoj office, and they said, "Oh, we took him out." And I said, "What do you mean you took him out?" "Oh, we took him out, and well, where is he?" They don't know. We did not pay because you didn't pay. We were in Israel. Because you didn't pay, we took him out. So that's yours.
I want to add only one thing to her. I'm also from the same place, same history, does not matter. And I was told that in the cemetery there is a beautiful sculpture of Moses done by the famous sculptor, and there are, under the sculpture are all the bones from all the graves that were taken. That's what I was told.
Oh, the bones?
The bones of the, whatever was left, I don't know if bones or ashes or whatever, under this statue. Like they put all the community not to separate, God forbid, one from another, so they put all of them together. And I have additional question about the synagogue, one. Second, about Jasenovac, what I read about the concentration camp, the official are saying that it was not a concentration camp and it was a working place, and they deny completely that so many Jews were taken there, and that the greeting in the concentration camp is like the greeting of the Ustasha. So I think it's important to know it.
First, the question about the cemetery. It's a city cemetery that was founded in 1878. And right away, when it was founded, the Jewish members of the city council asked if they could have their part, because then each religious community got its parcel of the cemetery, and then Muslims joined in 1912 when they became a minority in Austria-Hungary. So the Jewish members of the council wanted to know if they could own their plot, pay more, but it was denied. So in 60s, in 1961, 63, they had a mass exhumation of all the graves that were not paid for, and then sold to. It's terrible. I mean, I don't. It's this logic, not understanding different customs, and also not understanding the context where the majority of community was just annihilated. So this was the situation, and they put them in a grave just opposite the Hoshea Jacobi, the rabbi of Zagreb, and it says there, just in Croatian, that it's where they were put, and that's unfortunately the situation. It's I'm as well,
We just have time for one more question. I'm sorry.
One. Thank you so much. And I have 6, but I will ask just one. I was wondering if you could comment on. I don't know if it's on. If you could comment on. You mentioned about Aliyah Bet and how Yugoslav Jews could not join in, and I wonder what was the rationale. I mean, was the Yugoslav government so passionate about keeping Jews in? I mean, there are various responses to post-war governments in East Central Europe, and most of them seem to be quite open to having Jews leave for a variety of political reasons.
Well, first they were the army. It was still the immediate post-war, so all men had to serve the army, and then they didn't allow anyone out. So it was not only the Jews. Anyone couldn't leave. They just, whoever wanted to leave, either had to make some kind of agreement or just ran away, without the passport.
Thank you very much again, Dr. Brandl. I'd like to call on Linda Levy from the Joint, who runs our archives.
Thank you, Jane. I hope you all enjoyed the program today, and I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank our co-sponsor, the Center for Jewish History, and Julie Kaplan in particular. And I'd like to draw your attention to the material on our table outside, including the next program that we will be co-sponsoring together on January 8th, and that will relate to Bulgaria during the Holocaust. Please look at our website, archives.jdc.org, sign up for our newsletter, and you can see some of our publications outside. Thank you all for coming.